Welcome to Resilience Talk, hosted by Paul Spencer of Second Nature Solutions. Let's dive in.
So I hope you're getting some value from the conversation that we've had around the ownership series. We've talked about a lot of different things, and for me, I'm hoping and expecting, maybe it would be a better word, I'm expecting all of you to be taking some lessons from the conversation that we're having, and to be applying a lot of those things into your daily thoughts, into your daily work, and then into your strategic planning. I know I've heard from some of you about some things might be a little confusing, or there's a couple of yeah buts in some of the conversations that we've had so far, and that's okay, right? Not everybody is exactly the same. Not every scenario is exactly the same. Not every industry or business is the same. We have different people, different cultures. We have different processes. We have different imposed inputs. And that's expected, right? And so there could be some yeah buts. But I will tell you that even though you may have some yeah buts, the principles and the thinking around everything that we're discussing is 100% valid, right? And applicable for you and for your business. Now, you may be able to tweak it. You may be able to apply it in a slightly different way, right? That's the point. The point is for us to become aware, to have some understanding, and then to be able to apply it how it would fit into our own environments, right? So keep coming with the thoughts. Keep coming with the emails. I get some different whatever they're called. They're not DMs on LinkedIn, but messages on LinkedIn. And yeah, keep those coming. It's a good conversation, and I'm here to help you, right? So I'm here to serve you, and if you have questions or you have a particular scenario that's playing out, I'm always happy to have the conversation. So if we think about the ownership series, we've talked about financial performance, growth potential, key dependencies, recurring revenue, right to win, corporate structure is what we talked about last time. Today, we're going to talk about key management and leadership. And then the last one that we'll talk about next time is owner involvement. So today, we're going to talk about key management and leadership. This is one of the top three. So we have to have, from a buyer's perspective, these are the things I'm going to evaluate where you are and what's the value of your business. But also from an owner of an asset, this is one of those key things, which is I have to have a good foundation, which is your financial performance, right? I have to be able to have some kind of market, which is the right to win. And then I have to have some kind of structure within my organization, which is this key management leadership aspect. I will tell you that this one is lacking for a lot of you. As family businesses, in that, let's see, probably in that 4 million to even probably up to the 30, maybe close to 40 million revenue. The idea of building out your key management and leadership, your executive team, as I would call it, is very immature. And I mean that in a way that says that you haven't spent a lot of time thinking about it. You haven't spent a lot of time experimenting with it. You haven't spent a lot of time growing it and in building up the capability within your executive team. And so you're very lean at that position. And most of the time, from my understanding of how you operate and the thinking that you have, is that's very intentional, right? It's family business. We have a few people up here that are making decisions. Maybe even the founder is still making decisions, and so that's intentional. We let the staff, the employees, run the business, and then I'll manage everything else up here. That may be well and good for some portion of the business, but as in the aspect or the lens of building an asset, it's taking over the long time, over the long period, as you get on the back end of either the succession of yourselves. So let's say you're 50, and that's towards the back end of your career of owning the business. So now you've got, say, 10, 20 years at the most to start to build an asset, right? To build your key management team. And the longer that sits, the longer you take to do that, the less valuable your business is. So one of the key questions that we ask is, does the business have long-term key employees that can operate and continue to operate the business over a long period of time, right? And so when we're thinking about that, and if I'm to ask you that question, if we have value in your business, meaning your asset has value, you will very easily answer that question. I have 3, 4, maybe even 5 people who have longevity. Now, it doesn't mean that they've been here for 30 years. They could have been here for 5 years, but they know how to operate their section of the business, and they also know how to integrate with the other executives, my other executive leaders within the business. And if I'm not around for 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, the business just runs, right? I'm not dependent on, they're not dependent on me, right? So some of those questions we have to ask ourselves is, what is the capability of my current executive team? And I know a lot of you are going to say, what executive team? And that right there is an issue. That's a big problem. And you need to practice hiring. It's not easy to hire, especially at the executive level. You guys are really good at hiring at the staffing level. You've been doing that for years, for decades. What you're not good at is hiring an executive who could be your right-hand person, your COO. You don't have to give them these titles, but essentially they become an operating manager or a director of sales, right? Could be more of a VP, a number 2 type position. And this is really important because you may not win on the first, second, or third round of hiring an executive. And it's going to take you some learning on one, how do I define this position? 2, how do I qualify the people, the interview process into this position? How do I onboard this position? How do I sustain this position over a month, 2 months, 6 months? These are all things that you don't know how to do, and you can't just snap your fingers and assume that it's going to work first time, right? It's going to cause disruptions. It's going to change the way your processes work. It's going to change the way you work. All very important. But once you get over that hurdle and you hire the first executive, now you have some learnings. You can hire a second executive. And when I call them executives, it doesn't mean you have to have C-suite. It just means that you're hiring leadership within your organization that can run the business. So there's also a balance between tenure, meaning years in the business, 20, 30 years, and the amount of time they have remaining in their career, right? So again, when we're talking about value within your asset, you could say, well, Paul, the capability of my executive team is very high. I've got 3 really high tenure, really very competent, been in the business for 35 years, and they're a very strong executive team. And then I get to say as the buyer, well, how many more years before they retire? And that's a risk for me as a buyer. So I need to have a balance. You need to have a balance between tenure and then also the runway of the remaining time span of their career, right? So if I've been here for 10 years, but I've got another 15 years in my career and I plan on staying at this particular business, that's adding value into your asset. If my whole executive team, again, using that same example, 20 is more like 30, 40 years in, and they're going to retire within the next 5 years, that's no value to me as a potential buyer. So very important to have some mix of seniority versus junior, but also capability within the leadership aspect of how the team is working, right? Your leadership team. And then what are the aspirations? What are your aspirations? And what are the leadership's aspirations? So then when I ask you about the executive team, and let's kind of run through this, and you're like, Paul, we have high capability. We have 4 great executives, leadership positions, management positions that are running the business. And they have a nice tenure, remaining career balance, right? So it's a good team. It's a good mix. We have some legs. We have some runway with that team. And when I say, well, what are their aspirations for themselves and for the business? Those have to also align, right? Because as a buyer, if they say that I really love working with Paul, who's the owner, and as soon as Paul leaves, I'll probably look for something else, or I have aspirations to move on and do something else and do something different, or I have aspirations to build this company into something even bigger and better. Those are all valid aspirations for them, but they add or discount value to the company. If I'm a buyer and you have a great team, but their aspirations are beyond this organization, meaning they're going to eventually leave, then again, I'm losing my leadership capability as a buyer. So then let's talk about lean versus corporate. So this is really important because family businesses they don't own, they have a mindset of running lean, right? They're not going to have lots of top heavy, high expense overhead, indirect labor costs. They just don't. And that's why they're very successful, because they're very good financially in that regard. But regardless of the size, and whether you run lean or you do have more of a traditional kind of corporate structure, you have to understand where's the cohesion of leadership. And that's my term, cohesion of leadership at all the levels. So if I was to evaluate your organization and you look at the staff, these are the bare metal staff, the people who are boots on the ground, hands doing the work, whatever it is, whether it's a service or it's more of a product, or you're building in say a manufacturing company. Those are the people, that staff, those are the people doing the work. And then typically you have a management layer that sits on top of them. Those could be a leadership aspect. And then as you go up the organization, you have different levels of leadership. So you'll branch over into some operations things. You'll branch over into accounting, financial aspects. You'll branch over into sales, right? And then those start to have different leadership capabilities. So as I'm looking and listening and maybe even interviewing the folks in your business, I'm trying to evaluate the cohesion of leadership from bare metal staff, the actual workers, all the way up to the owner. And you may have good cohesion of leadership at the top, but you may lack cohesion from, say, a kind of a director of operations down to the staff itself. And so that's a discount, because I need to have cohesion all the way up. And so when I'm thinking about key leadership and key management, I'm thinking from bottom all the way up to the top. And how is that all connected? Now, it doesn't mean that I have to have lots of managers at each level, and I don't need to have this very heavy and stuffy corporate structure, but you should be able to answer the question as a buyer about how leadership is tied from the bottom all the way up, and what does that flow actually look like? And there's processes involved in there. And then again, the question is asked, if the person at the top is not available, how does the business function? And the business should be able to function for a period of time because of the cohesion of its leadership. So hopefully that makes sense. This is like I said, this is one of the top 3 aspects of building value into your business. So you want to be thinking about that financial performance. How do I prove historically where we are? What's that right to win? What's that differentiator that I have within my industry? And then what's my key management and leadership, the cohesion of leadership from the bottom staff all the way up to the founder.